Hey everybody, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the brand new Bestarc MIG 145 welder. This is so new that at the time I'm making this video, it's not for sale yet. It will of course be for sale by the time you see this video. And I'm actually really excited about this one for a number of different reasons, which I will go into in the video. But yeah, I'm kind of hyped about this one. First, I want to thank Bestarc for sending this to me for the purpose of this review. There'll be links below, there'll probably be affiliate links. And I'm also, at the time that I'm making this video, I believe the price for this is going to be $169. Don't hold me to that. This product hasn't been really released yet, so that could change. But I hope it stays there because that would be a really good price for this. And I'm going to dispense with the unboxing here. You guys don't like watching unboxings, and to be honest, I don't really like making them that much, but don't worry, I will show you everything that comes in the box when you open it. So, with that all being said, let's get started. I'm excited about this one. This is a 145 amp inverter welder, runs on both 110 and 220 volts, and has a 60% duty cycle on 220 at 145 amps. It can run 030, 035, and 040 flux core wire, or 030 solid core wire with a shielding gas. Yes, that is correct. This machine has the capability to use shielding gas. It can also run stick rod and can do lift TIG as well. It's a synergic welder, meaning that the voltage, amperage, and wire speed, if you're wire welding, all move together with a single adjustment knob. But that mode can be turned off, and then you can move the voltage independently up or down plus or minus 3 volts. So let's talk for a minute about what actually comes in the box. You get the machine itself, obviously. You get what is, in my opinion, a rather short 5-foot long MIG gun lead. You get a fully assembled MIG gun with a, I think that's an 030 tip that comes on it, and a nozzle meant for a shielding gas. And this is one of the few times you'll not hear me complain about getting a nozzle meant for shielding gas. It also has this cute little dongle on the front thing that lets you switch polarities and switch between types of welding. It comes with about a 5-foot long power cord with a 110 volt plug on the end, and it comes with about a 6-foot long hose for running gas that comes with crimped brass fittings on each end. And there's a fan on the back, and there's an on-off switch. So in the box is a 6-foot long ground clamp, a 6-foot long stinger for stick welding, a 110 to 220 adapter. You get a small, bag of accessories that has a little bit of Teflon tape in it for the gas hose. You have another wire roller on it. There's for 0.8 and what's the other side? 0.9 or 030 and 035. And you get 3 tips in there for 035, 040, and I think there's another 030 in there as well. And there's also another feed roller that's actually on the machine, which does 0.8 and 1.0 millimeter, at least that's what it's marked, or 030 and 040. And you get a manual with it, which is kind of abbreviated, but you know what? It covers everything you really need to know. Covers how to load it, covers all the specifications, covers a different way to set it up. I think back here on this page was how to set it up for flux core. This is how to set it up for solid wire. This is how to set it up for stick welding. And this is how to set it up for TIG welding. Note that it does not come with a TIG torch. And then we have some information on actually how to TIG weld, how to stick weld, and it says high frequency arc ignition for TIG, but I'm not sure this machine has high frequency because this is a lift TIG. I think some electrode selection, how to grind your tungstens. Also in the box, it comes with two 1.1 pound rolls of wire. 1 millimeter or 040 flux core and 0.8 millimeter or 030 solid steel wire. And that's everything that comes in the box. So let's take a look at the front panel and digital display on this real quick. If you look under here, you'll notice it says 9th generation. It's branded Bestarc up there. Down here it says TIG, arc, MIG, gas, gasless, welder, 110, 220 volts, and MIG 145. We have 4 buttons, each that has an arrow in it, and the arrow points to the spot, to the setting on the digital display that it changes. We have a center button with a little pointer in it, and that center, or excuse me, a center knob with a pointer in it, and that knob also is a button. You can click it. Also, I want to note that there are slight detents here, and you can feel them. I'd personally like them to be a little bit more snappy, but hey, I'm just happy they're there at all. One thing worthy of note before I turn it on is that the fan runs when you weld, and it comes on when you first turn it on. But if you don't weld for a while or it just sits idle, the fan does switch off. I have also noted that occasionally when I'm not welding and it's just turned on, the fan will occasionally turn on. So I don't know whether it's on a sensor or a timer or both. I haven't quite figured it all out yet, but it's nice that it does switch off when you're not welding and stays off most of the time. All right, let's turn it on. Watch it start up. And once it gets started up, I'm going to let the fan stop, and then I'm going to come back and we'll talk about the screen. Okay, now that the fan's off, let's take a look at the screen. I'm sure the fan will turn back on at some point. It does seem to have a mind of its own. I'll just talk loud enough to be over top of it. The fan is probably on both a heat sensor and a timer, as well as turning on when you pull the trigger of the welder or start welding in some other way. When the fan is on, there's a little green light here that says fan, which I'm sure you'll see shortly. It says 110 volts here because I am plugged into 110 volts. It says 2T and 4T here. This button switches between 2T and 4T. And what that means is on 2T, it takes 2 trigger presses to start and stop welding. On 4T, it takes 4 trigger presses, so you can press the trigger and release it on 4T and it keeps welding, and then to stop, press and release it again. Right here, it says synergic, which tells us we're in synergic mode with an A and a V, meaning amperage and volts, and a little icon denoting that if you press the center button, it will take it out of synergic mode, which it does. Now it doesn't say synergic, it only says V, and that times out after about 3 seconds if you don't make any changes. And now I can change my voltage offset, my fine tuning of the voltage, up or down a total of 3 volts in either direction. And it will remember that offset after it goes back into synergic mode. And of course, in synergic mode, when we turn the knob up and down, it moves voltage and amperage together along with wire speed if you're wire welding. Also, one thing worthy of note is this little green half ring around here, the green kind of bars. That just kind of tells us where we are on our scale. 50%, 75%, and that will change because some of the different settings have a different maximum. So that can change as you change the different settings. Down here, we can change our wire size from 030 to 035 to 040. And up here, we can change gas to gasless or flux core to MIG. Right now, we're set on gasless. Note that if we change to gas, we're only allowed to run 030 wire. So, and of course, on gasless, when we pull the trigger, it won't activate the solenoid that lets gas out. And when we're on gas, it will. So let's go back to gasless. Now here we have MIG, TIG, and MMA, and you'll notice the same thing when I change it here. When we go from MIG to TIG, we lose some of our other settings, and then when we go to MMA, it changes yet again, and there is the fan. So that is how the screen operates. The only thing I didn't mention is this white line that keeps redrawing back and forth across here. Not sure why they just didn't make that solid. I don't know. Anyway, that is the screen. It seems complex at first, but honestly, it really is very self-explanatory. I've gone ahead and loaded in the 1mm or 040 flux core wire they provided. Very easy to do. Got a couple of nice spring-loaded buckles on either side. Just flip them up. The whole top flips up. You have a nice sticker in here which tells you how to load the wire and some basic settings for different types of materials. I always like to see these. Every welder should come with something like this in it. Again, the 040 flux core wire they provided. A couple of things worthy of note here. It loads pretty much like any other machine, except there is no tension adjustment on either of these springs. It is preset. This is a 1/4 turn release. I'm not going to do it because I don't want my my wire to go crazy. And this just flips up and down, and you can turn that to your heart's content, and it doesn't change it. So you might like that. You might not like it. It's just kind of two adjustments that a new welder doesn't have to worry about. And best of all, there is a wire feed button. Pressing this button runs the wire at full speed without making the wire hot and without running your gas if you've got shielding gas. You might not care about that, but let me tell you something. Once you have one of these, you realize what a quality of life improvement it actually is. You don't have to dial your setting around to get the wire to go high and then remember where you were set. You don't have to remember to shut your gas off and then remember to turn it back on. So, nice little touch. Quality of life. Once you've got one, you don't want to go back to a machine that doesn't have one. I think I'm about ready to do some welding, but a couple of things to note. One is, normally when I'm flux core welding, I switch to a flux core nozzle. For some reason, none of the flux core nozzles I have fit on this gun, and I think it's how fat that tip is, and I don't have any other 040 tips, so I have to use theirs, so I'm going to have to use the gas nozzle. Let's start welding. I'm just going to pick a piece of scrap because first thing I like to do with a new machine, I just want to get a feel for it. Also, I want to know, I'm going to be starting it on 110 volts, and I want to know if it's going to pop my 20 amp breaker. Okay, I am plugged into a 110 volt 20 amp circuit. That's probably actually closer to 120 here. I'm usually around 118, 119. I am set to 100 amps, 19 volts. I'm on gasless MIG. I am set to 040. I'll tell you, these little inverter machines are getting so good, it's crazy. That was very, very, very smooth. And that was the actual first bead I've ever run with this machine. Okay, I am now set to 120 amps and 20 volts. That's very, very smooth. I'm really impressed. All these new little inverter machines that I've used are very smooth. Way better than they were 10 years ago, that's for sure. Wow, that's nice. I just realized that when you're plugged into 110 volts, the machine maxes out at 125 amps and 20.2 volts. Since I just ran a 5-inch long, 4-inch long bead at 120 and it didn't pop my breaker, I'm not worried about it popping it at 125. So let's go directly to 220 now. Okay, I am now plugged into my 30 amp 220 volt outlet, and it's actually about 230 or a little over here. You can see the light here. I hope you can see it says 220, and now I can go from 125 all the way up to 145. I am cranked all the way up to 145 amps and 21.2 volts. Let's see how it runs. Okay, I think I'm going to tweak my voltage down a little bit there. I think that might be just a little bit too much voltage. So, welded nice, but I don't like that surging. So, I'm going to turn my voltage down a volt. So, let's go from 21.2 to 20.2. That's better, but it's still surging a little bit on me. Let's drop another volt. I just think 145 is too hot for this wire. Let's drop 2 volts. There we go. Come on. There we go. I like that better. I mean, you gotta love the Synergic MIGs because they always get you in the ballpark, and they're also usually very close, but sometimes you do gotta be smarter than the machine. Not bad looking welds at all. I mean, remembering the fact that I can't weld in a straight line, very nice looking. First welds out of the machine. I'm pretty impressed. I've got some 16 gauge or 1/16 wall square tube, about 1.5 millimeters or thereabouts. I'm going to plug this back into 110, probably set it for about, I don't know, 60 amps, and we'll see how easily we can weld up thin stuff. A little hot for it, especially where there's a gap. I should have a backer plate in here, but let's do it without it. There is that weld. There was a pretty good sized gap in there, but it wasn't hard to do. Let's try a little bit of this. Let's turn the voltage down as much as we can, down to 3 volts. That's 13.5 volts at 50 amps. See about what that does for me. Oh yeah, that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do if you're running the thin stuff. Without a doubt. So you can see there, the ability to turn that down really gave me the ability to run that thin stuff without burning holes in it. So while I still have the flux core wire in it, let's weld one of these test plates. This is 1/8 inch thick steel, and it's just a T-joint. We'll leave it on 110 volts, and I'll turn it up to, oh, I don't know, 100. Let's try it at 100 and see how it does. So, and I want to get the voltage differential I put in it out of it. So it's right now with that voltage differential, it's going to be 16 volts. So let's take that out back to 0. And now it's going to be 100 amps at 19 volts. Very smooth weld. So cleaned up a little bit. There we go. That was our weld, 100 amps, 19 volts. Let's switch to 220 and let's find something a little bit thicker. Okay, I hope you can see it. I am plugged back into 220. I am maxed out at 145 amps and 21 volts, and I'm going to leave the voltage there. That is the normal voltage for it on Synergic. And what I have here is some quarter wall. It was originally square pipe, but I cut it open, and I have got a nice V cut in there. It's not V'd all the way to a knife edge. I left about, I don't know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch at the bottom, and I have it squoze up tight. So let's weld this. Yeah, once again, I think the voltage on Synergic is just a bit too high. 1 or 2 volts too high for this wire. Let's see what we got there. I didn't fill that completely up. I was mainly just looking for a root pass, and that's what I got. Look on the back for some penetration. I'm going to turn it down a bit, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that up the rest of the way. Why not? Let's turn that down to, let's turn it down to 110, and then I'll run the rest of that and fill that up. That was pretty good. I'm not angry about that at all. Let's let it cool down and I'll clean it up and be right back. So here's what that last cover pass looks like. You know, one of my faults is when I was in the welding business, when I got out of welding school when I was like 19 or 20, I went into the industry and I could pass government welding tests, and I could make welds so nice they would put them in a picture book, you know, and I kind of judge everything I do based on that, which isn't really fair because that was a long time ago. So while this is certainly not the best cover pass I ever made, it certainly is more than acceptable for what I do right now. You know what, let's switch it over to solid wire gas shielding, and let's see how nice it runs on that, because I'm a little excited about being able to do both. Okay, I have the solid core MIG wire in it. The machine is set to gas 030. I have the 030 wire and tip on it. We're going to do 100 amps. And I'm going to start, and I'm running straight CO2 for those of you who are interested. And I'm going to start out running 20 CFH. Hopefully that'll be enough. If not, I'll crank it up. And I'm just going to start by running some beads along this same plate just to kind of get a feel for the machine. So it just dawned on me that I've been doing all that welding on solid core MIG and I forgot to reverse the polarity. So that's probably why it's building up so much and not laying flat. So let's fix that. So to change the polarity for solid core, we're going to unplug our little dongle out of this side. We're going to move our ground in its place. And now we are going to put the dongle over here. Like that. Like that there. So now we are properly set up for solid core MIG. Okay, so now with the polarity set correctly for solid core wire, I have it plugged back into 110. It's gasless 030, or excuse me, it's gas 030, and we are set at 50 amps. And let's weld this thin wall 16 gauge tube up, square tube. I'm going to start with the side here. I got about 1/8 of an inch gap. Yeah, it's not quite hot enough, is it? No, I just punched a hole, so maybe it is. Alright, that came out okay. It didn't quite go to the end. Let's try the same thing here, except I'm going from no gap to 1/8 of an inch at the end. There we go. That's not too shabby, not too great, not too shabby. Let's do the other side here just for fun. That's even better yet. So that's pretty good. I like that. Might as well do the last one here, huh? Beautimus. Beautimus. That made me very happy. Like that a lot. So yeah, it works really well. 50 amps on 16 gauge. Let's weld another one of these small little test plates I made a while back. Let's see how that works for us. Let's turn the heat up. Let's turn the amperage up to 100. That turned out really nice. I mean, I'm really pleased with that. See if I can pick it up and show it to you. I am very pleased with that. I'm sorry, I know it's kind of in the shadows there. Not much I can do about it at the moment. My gloves are starting to smoke. So let's weld the other side of it too. I think I could have used a wee bit more voltage there, but nonetheless, it'll be good. Let's go up to 220 and let's try some of this thicker stuff. Okay, this is 220, 145 amps, and I have my voltage offset up to +3 at 24.2 volts. This is the 1/4 inch thick wall, and I have got it V'd out. Let's run it in there and let's see what we get. That's better. Not sure what problem I was having there to begin with, but yeah, that's way better. Wish I had done this one too. For sport and amusement, I'm going to run some rod in this. I've got some 332 7018, and I note that set on MMA, the machine goes down to 20 amps, but only goes up to 105. So this is 332 rod, so I'm going to go ahead and see how easy it is to strike and see what it runs like on 105 amps. Not something I do very often anymore. And we are set to reverse polarity or electrode positive, which is where I think we should be for 7018, although some of you may disagree, even though it does run pretty decently on straight polarity. So let's see what we can do here. Let me get my rod in, held the way I like it. That'll work. Let's see how much fun this is going to be. Oh, very easy. Oh, very easy. Well, pop my breaker. Okay, power's back on. Let's check that weld and have a look at it. That may be that may actually be a little too hot for that rod. Let's turn our voltage down to 95. In fact, let's turn it down to 90. Excuse me, our amperage down to 90, and let's try it again. Okay, machine is set at 90 amps. It's plugged into a 120 volt outlet. This is 332 7018. What's left of this rod here? I tell you what, of all the inexpensive multifunction welders I've had, this one starts an arc far easier than any of the others do. I'm not going to complain about that at all. Let's try it on 220, even though I do not need more power for 332 rod on 220, and 332 is all I have right now. So I'm going to switch it off and switch over to 220. Okay, we're on 220, and now we go from 20 amps on MMA up to 125. I'm certainly not going to pop my 30 amp 220 breaker at 125, although I think that is too hot for this stick. But let's do it anyway, just because. Why the hell not? What else are we doing, right? Oh, not a great position for this. Way too hot for this. Way too hot for that rod. That whole rod is glowing. And it's glued into the... No, it's not. It came out. Okay. So I think that's going to be all the welding. I have been out here for 2 days now, 5-6 hours a day with this, and I think I've welded with this more than enough to draw some conclusions. And oh, look at that, huh? That's how you want that to come off, huh? Haven't seen that for a while in anything I've done with rod. Nice. Anyway, I'm going to sit down and put my thoughts all together. So now that the welding is all done, and before I sum this up and give my final opinion, I think there's something worthy of note, and that is I think this might be Bestarc's first ever welder. I've looked for other model welders they've made, and I can't find any. Now, they have been making plasma cutters for some time. I have one right here I tested a while back, linked below. They make probably what could arguably be the best inexpensive plasma cutter you can get. I have never ever seen a bad review of their plasma cutters. They are really excellent. So they certainly have the inverter technology figured out. There's no doubt about that. So it shouldn't come as any shock that their first welder works pretty darn good. So let's take a look at the welding I did. This isn't all of it. Some of it got dumped, but this is a lot of it. These are some of my initial welds here on it. You can see them back here. This was the flux core back here. This was more flux core. This was MIG. Remember, I had the MIG polarity set wrong for a while. And this is the stick welding that I did with it. And this is all a combination of MIG and flux core. It's not too hard to tell which is which if you know what you're looking at. This is all MIG and flux core. This one with the cover passes was flux core. This one with the straight multiple passes was MIG. And this one was MIG. A couple of these are flux core and a couple are MIG, and they're welded on both sides. I spent a total of 10 hours over 2 days out here welding with this machine. So I did quite a bit of welding, and I think I can certainly give you an opinion of what I think. So let's talk about this welder. Let's talk about what I don't like, what I do like, and the elephant in the room, because I think for most of us, there really is an elephant here. First, let's get what I don't like out of the way, because there's really only two things. I do not like the short gun lead. 5 feet is just too short for me. I can't always get the machine, especially if it's on the cart connected to a gas bottle, close enough to what I'm working on and still have enough slack to move around my workpiece without constantly repositioning the welder or yanking on the lead. I'm not saying everyone needs a 10-foot lead. If you're sitting at a welding table, welding up small parts, 5 feet is probably all you need, and a longer one might actually get in your way. But if you're working on cars or fabricating anything bigger than a flower pot stand, it's not long enough. I would gladly, happily, even gleefully click on a box on an order form and pay another $10 or $20 to get a longer lead with a welder. Now, it's not a deal breaker by any means. You can buy a 10-foot lead with a gun on it for 30 bucks, and they're pretty easy to swap. Next thing is, I'm kind of concerned about damage to the digital display without any kind of shield or cover over it. Especially with a 5-foot lead, you're going to be really close to your workpiece, and it would be a real shame to damage the screen, you know, considering how nice it is. Now on to the things that I like. It welded great on both 110 and 220 volts. The machine is smart enough to know what you're plugged into and adjust the range on the display so that you know what amperage you're really putting out and not having to guess. If you're looking for a welder that won't pop your 110 volt 20 amp breaker, this welder should be on your short list. I only managed to pop my 20 amp breaker once, and that was stick welding with the machine maxed out and honestly hotter than what I really needed for the 332 rod I was using. Flux core, MIG, and stick, it all welded really nicely. Synergic operation is close for most of the amperage range, and it's easy to tweak the voltage up or down if you need to. With stick welding, I had an easier time striking and maintaining an arc with this machine than on any machine I've used since they said Lincoln on them, and that's saying something. I love the screen and the controls. It's well laid out, easy to understand, and easy to use even with gloves on. I really like the smart fan that shuts off when it's not needed. It's nice on a longer job not to have to keep turning the machine off between tack welds to keep the fan from droning in my ears. That makes me nuts. I like the wire feed button. Really makes swapping wire and getting back to work fast and easy. And while it might be somewhat of a personal preference, I do really like the top loading for the wire as opposed to loading in from the side. For the most part, This is just a well thought out, good working welder with a lot of nice quality of life features. Now, on to what I see is the elephant in the room for most of us. And that's the question of, do I need to pay more to run solid core with gas shielding when flux core will do everything I need it to? And you know what? The answer is probably not. But if you're welding inside of a shop, flux core wire brings some negatives with it. It's smoky, it's dirty, the welds have to be chipped and wire brushed, which produces a lot of grit that gets all over your benches, your floors, your tools, your clothes, and everything. Plus, you know what? You really need a respirator or at least a good particle mask and good ventilation to use flux core inside, or you're going to be blowing your nose black for the next few days. Flux core is cheap, convenient, works good, and along with stick, a great way to weld outdoors when you really don't care about the smoke or the mess or if the wind is blowing. On the other side of the coin, MIG costs more. It can be unusable in a windy environment. It requires a gas bottle, and the 20-pound CO2 gas bottle that I use back here, it costs about $80 new if you want to own your own, and costs about $20 to have refilled or exchange, and can last 8 to 10 hours worth of welding. MIG produces very little smoke. There's no flux to be chipped, brushed, cleaned off your floors, or blown out of your nose. Ventilation requirements are much lower, and you really don't need a respirator while MIG welding. I know other people will tell you different, but you really don't. And while some people might disagree with me, I find welding thin materials or joints with a gap to be a lot easier with MIG than with flux core. And discounting the need for shielding gas nozzle on the gun, it's also much easier to see the puddle on a MIG weld. Also, MIG, at least for me, is a lot easier to run in all positions than flux core. It can be pushed, it can be drugged without worrying about getting flux in the weld puddle. So even if you don't think you need it at the time, it's kind of a no-brainer, at least to me, when it's only another $40 to go from a machine that can't run gas to one that can. I mean, $40 will barely buy you and a couple of buddies lunch at McDonald's. And once you go to gas for welding inside a shop or garage, you'll never want to go back to flux core. Just the time spent cleaning up the mess flux leaves is enough to make it worth it to me. So my final opinion on this welder, it's great. I love everything about it, well, other than that short gun lead. If you're looking for an inexpensive and small welder that's a cut above all the rest, you'll love this one. Go buy it. Thanks again to Bestarc for sending this out to me. I'm sure we'll be seeing it again in future videos. And thanks to all of you for watching and commenting. Bye for now.